Kinda. That's a lot better than it was.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what we just changed. It's a lower tool bushing. This is what guides the point. This one is worn out. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but it's ovaled, so it's longer this way than it is this way. That's typical of hammer wear. Very, very typical, because your curl on your machine only works two-dimensionally, and it doesn't work in a 360-degree pattern. These older NPK hammers are held on by this BB ring, okay? And it's a ring that holds the point, or the bushing in, up in the hammer body, okay? We use these BBs, okay? And they go into this ring right here, and there's a matching ring inside the tool holder right here. So you push the bushing, this is the new bushing I just put in, up in the tool holder, and there's a ring about right here that runs around the inside of this, the tool holder here, and it matches up with the tool bushing. You put the BB in it, and you do it all through this hole that's got a rubber plug in it right now. And you put about a dozen BBs in there. You actually really don't want to go to where it's solid all the way around like a bearing would be, because you want them to be able to move, because it's just nothing but impact force that sits there and works on them. And if you get them to where they can rub together under pressure, they'll actually wear themselves down. Then you take a plug, which the plugs are oversized, so you smash them in to fit, okay? And it's really basically it. Now, this new bushing is really tight, and this is how you check tolerance. That's all the tolerance you want. Now, something to note on these older hammers, because they're held in by BBs, it's actually a floating bushing. So these bushings will sit here and spin. I like that because it keeps them from ovaling out like this in such a bad shape. And it makes your bushing last longer. And if you can keep your lower tool bushing in spec better than your upper tool bushing that's way up here, that you have to take the whole hammer apart to change, stays in a better spec. So that's kind of the nuance to it. Really simple stuff, folks. It's also simply complex. Okay, so like here's some more stuff with a point. I burned the point out on this doing what I was doing when it broke. And the only reason that I had to change the lower tool bushing right now is we're in the middle of a job. The rock's kind of hard. I was hammering, the plug came out, and I didn't know it, because half the time they break off and go back inside. You can't see them, but they're there. Well, the BBs started falling out, no one noticed, and then the bushing just fell out. No big deal. You obviously don't want to hammer once it falls out. You'll end up destroying your upper tool bushing or hurting your point. But this morning we just slapped another new tool bushing in, because that one's worn out anyway. So since we had it out, we're going to change it, because the only way to change these once you get the BBs in them is you have to cut the tool bushings in half. So we would always take an air arc or a torch and cut the bushing in place in the tool holder. And when you do that, then you can get them to where they cut. And you got to cut them into 3 pieces so you can get 1 piece out. And then the BBs fall out and they unwedge. So that's the reason for it. I went on ahead and dug a new point out of the point pile. I got a pile of points. You know, we've been at this for quite a few years. This point is actually only 2 years old. It's actually the newest point besides the new one on the ground over there. Points are really simple. These are chisel points. Points are all oriented. Points don't spin, so they're slotted on one side where the pin, holder pin, is, and if you notice, they're slotted so they can slide up and down, okay? And then they have this collar right here. This collar goes up in the impact ring inside the hammer, and that's what lines it up with the piston to be hammered on. So when you hear your hammer make all kinds of weird noises and stuff and the point, well, people don't get these seated up in the impact ring, and they sit, this will catch on the ring trying to slide in because you're not lined up. And so your hammer, when you hit it the first time, will drop the body will drop 2 inches onto the point, and that's why, because you got to get up this collar. So things to be aware of, and if you do that enough times, you'll end up dry firing your hammer enough to where it's going to stretch the bolts and start leaking. So really simple. Really simple. Okay, folks, so we're kind of NPK snobs around here. I do own one other brand hammer that's not an NPK, and you know what, it's not a bad hammer. We got it for a really good price, that's why we bought it. But in our bigger category of hammers that we use, that we don't use on the minis, we've had a lot of this stuff for just years. I mean, I've got 2 7X hammers that are as old as I am, and I've got 2 4X hammers. One we've had ever since I can remember, and all we do is we keep rebuilding them and rebuilding them and rebuilding them, and they just run. They're like Energizer bunnies. You have to work to kill them. They are easy to kill, but to wipe the components out to where they're not reusable and worthwhile to rebuild, you really got to work at it. But here's some things of note. These are what's called an impact ring. So these impact rings is where the piston sits, and it comes down on the on this one. The piston comes down on this side. Okay, the point slides up this way. The impact ring is what guides the point to line up with the piston. So you have this circle here where you have the tapered top of the point slides into. And this impact ring is off of a 7X, and as you can tell, it's very oval. It's out of spec. We can't use it. It's garbage. It is now a paperweight. Okay. Here's some impact rings out of a 4X. This one, it's garbage. Can't be reused. This one is brand new. This came out of a hammer that was rebuilt, and it was blown up because they didn't get the bolts torqued right when they put it together, and they pinched it. It squished out all the seals. It didn't end well. Nothing wrong with the hammer components, the body, the piston, even both the sleeves. All of that's reusable. They just didn't have the bolts torqued right. They took it apart and sold it for parts, and I got it for a really good price. So I bought the body and the components and all that. So we're anyway going through parts and stuff. But this is a brand new impact ring, has almost no wear on it whatsoever. These 4X ones, NPK sells an insert, so you can machine the lip out and set an insert into them. And it's substantially cheaper. It's about 1/3 the cost of buying a brand new impact ring. They do not make one for a 7X. I have not gotten a straight answer as to why yet. We're looking at making one, but I'm not sure if it's cost effective by the time we do all the machining ourselves. So that's what these are why your lower bushings are so vitally important to keep in spec. Okay, here's the tool holder out of a 4X. It's the exact same design as the 7X we have that I was changing the bushing on this morning, and this bushing is set in the same way by BBs, and they just sit in here and they float, and it helps keep the wear square. Okay, and that's again really important. Okay, here's the hole where you put the BBs in. The rubber's all broke off inside. Like I say, it's a floating bushing. This bushing is out of spec. I don't have a point laying here, and I don't want to drag one up here. But this bushing is out of spec. It's too wide. And if you look in here, you see the lines, and you see the spot where the pinhole goes through. Okay, that right there is actually a wider diameter so that the point's not supposed to rub on it. And all that's supposed to do is the retainer pin drops through it. That's what holds the pin in. So you have the upper tool bushing on the other side. Okay, now I'm gonna flip this over and show it to you. Here's the upper tool bushing. I don't know if you can tell, but it's totally smoked. Like if you just look at the thickness of material here as opposed to here, there's just no comparison. And I don't know, maybe that, yeah, that does a lot better job. This upper tool bushing, you have to take the hammer completely apart like this to do, which means you have to reseal the hammer to put it back together. Not that that's a big deal. These 4X's, I'm buying seals from NPK for like 600 bucks. So as long as I don't have to change any other components in the upper section of the hammer, all I got to do is buy bushings and seals and bolt it back together, and we're good to go. Okay, but this is why your lower tool bushing is so vitally important, and why your point placement is so vitally important. Because again, this bushing is what keeps your impact ring from looking like that. And once the bushing gets wallered out, your impact ring is going to get wallered out. Okay, this is like a $300 bushing. This is like a $1,600 component because it's all one piece and it's all forged machine. So these are a chore. You end up having to air arc or scarf cut them out, and it's kind of a pain in the ass on these small hammers because the pin bore is so small. Big hammers is a lot easier because you just got room to get in there and work. And then you freeze the new bushings and set them. And you freeze them to get them to contract to set in. Again, really simple. It's just you gotta know how to screw with a hydraulic system to open these up so you don't contaminate them and screw them up. And it takes very little debris to get them messed up, but we've been building them out here in the open on tables. I mean, obviously I lay down, I clean up when we go back together with everything, but this is just how we go about it. Okay, and so this is the tool holder. These are a replaceable component. Again, this is one big reason I like NPK, because their hammers are all components. You know, when you build these things, you have the tool holder, and then the impact ring sets up on them like so. Okay, and then again, that's what guides your point all together. Okay, and they're components, and then the hammer body sits up here. Okay, so with all that, we're not going to get into the hammer body because I'm not dragging all that out. I'll make a video when I put them back together. Here's a variant for you. That is an H4XE tool holder. It's the same variant design as an H7X. And most of the HX series NPKs had that style of a tool holder. They were prone to cracking down around the mouth of the bushing. Those are all steel, so we actually have one somewhere, I don't know where it's at, but it cracked and we welded it back together, and it's ran years like that. So it's not the end of the world, but there is a tolerance spec. They do wear out if you don't take care of them. You have to be up on your bushing wear and stuff like that to keep them wearing out. The more proactive you are on maintenance, the longer it's going to last. And these things will run forever. Like, I've got hammers that the bodies on them, we've rebuilt them probably 4 and 5 times, but I would be willing to guarantee you that they got 8,000 plus hours on them. So, I mean, you can get after it. This is a 4XL design. This is a later design. Because the tool holders were cracking, they did this. And part of the reason the tool holders crack is because people were sitting there and prying on their point, which is a big no-no. And the biggest reason you pry on the point, don't want to pry, is you got these bolts, and these are rusted and seized up at the moment. I haven't gotten them freed up yet. Spare time project. But these bolts hold the whole hammer together. So you have components all sandwiched together, held together by 4 long bolts, and they're really easy to stretch when you're prying. And when you pry them, they separate the components from here and up here, and then they start leaking and the seals roll up and blow out. Okay, so that's why you don't pry. But the other reason you don't pry is, particularly on these older ones with the pointed cones, they would crack around the lower tool bushing. This tool bushing still sits the same way with BBs. Let's see, where's the, oh, here's the plug. Okay, and it sets in with BBs. It just doesn't have a rolled, flared tip on it. It just sets in. And this was the way they went basically from here on out. And to this day, in the small hammers that, 11, 1300 pound category, they're still making these square-faced tool holders. It just now, instead of them being a replaceable component, they're a unibody hammer. So if you bust this, your hammer's garbage. You got to buy a new one or run the gamble and fix it. And anyway, this is why I run these older hammers, is I've just got a stockpile of parts and I continue to accumulate more. My kids will be wearing this stuff out. So, and NPK is still very good for their parts supply. I have not been able to not get parts for these things, and they're 30 years old. So this is why we run NPK. This is kind of how a census and why hammer maintenance is important. And it's all just part of the business. If you're going to work in the rock, you're going to have to know how to run these things. Because again, a good hammer like these brand new with a warranty that you're going to just buy it brand new is about 25 grand. I can rebuild one myself completely with a new piston and possibly a little machining work, probably a new impact ring, and be into them less than 10 grand and run 1,500, 2,000 hours. And if you figure out what you can charge for hammers, you make some pretty good money at that. But when you're buying a brand new one every time you trade in a machine, you don't make money with them. It gets too expensive. So that's my 2 cents on the subject. And for anybody that wants to go, oh, hey, Blevins, just put a rock bucket on, you'll dig through it. Yeah, no. Rock buckets aren't the end-all, be-all. This is a rock bucket. And this is what happens to rock buckets. They get busted. This thing's been welded in so many places. And we quit using it because we did some tests for Caterpillar years ago, and if you look at the wear and tear that these things put on, you'll destroy a machine nothing flat with them. I mean, this bucket doesn't have the mileage on it you would think it does. And I mean, in fact, you get up here and you look at the edge, and this is probably the oldest one, but these edges aren't even beat on too bad. I mean, you got to stop and think. It's accelerated wear from digging in the rock, but they're not effective in the backhoe market. They really aren't. I've seen some single shank rippers that guys will use, and they work. But at the same time, I look at it and I'm like, if we're getting to that point that we got to go to something like this, I'm putting my hammer on and I'm charging accordingly, because I'm not taking the abuse out on my machine to expedite the customer's job. If they want it, they can pay for it. I'm not going to pay for it with my equipment. It's just taking money out of my pocket. And again, if you look at this bucket and look at the abuse the bucket has taken, every bit of abuse this bucket has taken has put that into a machine. We don't trade our machines off at the end of warranty. We keep them to 8, 10. We've had machines around here with 15,000 hours on them. That's how we run our business. This stuff doesn't allow you to do that. And when you're charging by the hour, abusing your machine with tools like this doesn't make you any money. So if we can't dig it with a normal bucket, we put a hammer on. Rock buckets are garbage. I don't think we've used these in 20 years, and I've got 2 of them and no one wants them.